If a fellow DM tells you they DM for a skilled player, what do you imagine classifies that player as skilled? This question was actually inspired by Daniel, your most recent video about, what is a skilled player? It got me thinking. So can we start with your take on what makes a skilled player, and then we'll kind of go around?
Oh, sure. And thank you for watching my video, I guess. For me, a skilled player is one that thinks kind of outside the box, and they've developed this skill over time. I talk about that a little bit in the video, or at least I try to anyways, where like you learn as you play what to do. So there is some thought about like, why would a first level character do this? But to me, it's a game. It's not just role playing. You're not just that character. You're also yourself. So you develop skills. You learn things. I'm going to make sure I take a 10-foot pole with me. I'm going to, have these cantrips or these scrolls, or depending on what game you're playing. Knowing how to use the system to maximize, and not in a cheating way. To do things that you just think would work well for you. You try it once, it works, you do it again. So for me, a skilled player is one that looks outside the box and doesn't just say, all right, I'm going to roll dice. I'm going to look around and say, what can my character do in this situation? And the thing is that these are the kind of characters, the players, that can aggravate some DMs. I know that. And I say this whenever I'm a player in people's game, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I want to try this, because it's like usually stuff that's outside the rule set. And I love that. When players come up with something that's like, there's no rule for that. Like, how do I even adjudicate this? But it's such a cool idea. And I don't believe that you should just let it happen. Like, I know there's that rule of cool thing. It's more just like, yeah, you're actually in this situation. It's not just like hit it with my sword. It's not just like use this thing the way it's meant to be used. It's how can I use what I have around me? And partially, I didn't say this in the video, but part of the reason why I made that video, now I'm thinking back at it, is because I watched a video where somebody was complaining about people looking at their character sheets. And I thought, you know what? Even in an old school game, original Dungeons and Dragons, you should be looking at your character sheet, because what are you carrying? Do you have a magic item, a potion, a mundane item you picked up? This is player skills, looking at what you have, whether it be your character's skills that are on their sheet or items they picked up, magic items, the research that they do. That's what makes a good player to me. Like a skilled player gets into the game and figures out how they can, I know you're not supposed to say you can win at Dungeons and Dragons, but they figure out how they can win, but in a fun way, like win that scenario, if you will. So that's a skilled player to me.
Man, I can relate to that. I still look down at my character sheet like, man, can this soap help me in this situation? Like, I try to think of it,
It's funny you say that too. I was just sorry, didn't want to keep going, but like, I love when players pick things up. They'll be like, you'll be in a room and you'll be like, oh, there's a kitchen and there's some spoons and bowls and stuff. And they'll be like, I'm going to take a bowl. And you're like, okay, I like this. Where's this going? That's good to me. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Skilled player, well, it's not a great answer, but genuinely, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So here's why. So, players that have what is a skilled player, right? Players have their different strengths and they also have their weaknesses. And even, like, if we look at it from a video game, even a person who's rolled like 20s and all of their stats for being a good player in D&D, the problem is that skilled and good is subjective, right? So, and what someone may consider or a good thing at my table, they may consider like, oh my gosh, I hate this. Why do you do this? It's so annoying. So I guess if we're talking about like, okay, what do you value like yourself as or what do you classify as a skilled player? It's many things, but I guess a couple of things would be, the simple things of like, I value a person who has the ability to roleplay not only between the NPCs, but also the fellow players, including people into the conversations to, we're trying to play the game together, right? I'm not trying to play a D&D by myself. Other things would be, I value someone who knows their abilities extremely, but even though they know them, they're willing to be creative and break the mold with unique ideas. They're like, okay, this is what I can do, but how can we sort of twist this? How can we sort of flavor this in a certain way? How can we really think outside the box? But lastly, I think more so than anything else that I really, really prioritize that makes a skilled player is someone who prioritizes fun over everything else. We're here to play a game. Dungeons and Dragons is a game. It's a very, very special game, but it is a game that we come to every single week or however many times we come to have fun overall. So it's the fun of the table, it's the fun of the player, and it's the fun of everyone around you. Someone who prioritizes that and really tries to make that the focus those are the type of people I really, really want at my table in game.
I echo everything you and Daniel said. I will also add players who are on time and players who really are good at Roll20 to help other players figure out what buttons to hit and everything, so the DM doesn't have to do it for everyone. That's also what I would add. Just kind of tongue in cheek.
Go ahead. There's many sort of things that can make a skilled player. It's just like that main thing is the biggest thing.
I would bet you and Daniel nailed like the best answer for this, and I hope we're gonna get into the Fringe stuff now. On that note, Brian, what do you think makes a skilled player?
Key, I really like your answer about having fun at the table. That's so important. You know, we're playing a game. It's a role-playing game, and role-playing is a part of it, but we are ultimately playing a game. So having fun, super duper important. In line with that, like the flow of play is really important as well. If your table is like in the motion of things, of an event or something like that, and somebody's got to stop everything, like, oh wait, hang on a sec, I think I have a spell. It's like, oh, okay, go ahead. We'll take a little break or whatever while you read, or maybe you can continue describing as you go, but eventually they're going to interrupt you. So like a player that at least is like familiar enough with their abilities to kind of know, well, I don't remember the specifics of the spell, but I know it does this. So let me kind of read that in the background while things are happening. Ah, yes. Okay. Now let me interrupt you so I can do this thing that's relevant. I think that's really cool, but kind of breaking the flow of the game, that it can get really annoying for the DM who's trying to describe an environment or something like that. A player that knows their sheet at least enough for the major things. I do think you should be reading your sheet for inventory. That's super important. You should be involved with your sheet and kind of referencing it here and there, but your major stuff, if you can't remember how like Misty Step works and things like that, like things that are kind of, you know, baked into some racial features or class features that are super important, they're going to keep coming up, and you keep on breaking the flow of the game to reference that. That is a sign that maybe you should study your character sheet a little more. So I think skill comes from, in my opinion, being at least familiar enough to sort of reference the major things on your sheet. I know there's like niche scenarios and stuff like that are going to come up, and you're going to have to do some reading, but to continually just break immersion over and over again, it can really get like frustrating for the table and the flow of the game, and break the fun a little bit. That's my major thing. I think there's that like it's hard to quantify skill in D&D in the gameplay. It's just a difficult thing for me to grasp. You know, everybody has different strengths and different levels of creativity. A skilled player and a skilled DM, you know, those are two different things for sure. But a skilled player, they can definitely help by you know, you have a DM has a world to manage. You got to manage these 2 pages of stuff.
Kind of at the core of what we're saying, the term is system mastery. And Daniel, you chatted that in our chat here, is like the more people mechanically understand the game, the more they can leave it behind. And this is an improv principle. So I have an improv background. That's kind of my wheelhouse, 10 years performing. One of the best things I could get people to learn is that when someone's trying to teach you a principle, that it's not a rule at all times. And if you master it, you will know when to depart from it. And to me, a really like skilled player, they know the system, they know what like mechanically they can do, and then they push their DM to make new rulings and say, hey, how are we going to depart from this together? Not in a gotcha DM kind of way, but let's have some fun. You know, I love that kind of mindset. Rook, what do you think about this?
Well, I was going to make a comment actually close to what you said, but you said it in a very eloquent, better way than I could have. Like everyone has kind of said the best parts of it. I was going to also add a little bit of just kind of on the other side of people not thinking they're skilled players and that making them hesitant to ask questions. And I really think once you've mastered that character, asking your DM is like what you were saying is super important, and that it does improve the game. So just because you don't think something like, well, I don't exactly know how the rules work, it's like, it's okay to, can I do this? Can I attempt this? I don't know how I would, but that's what the DM is for. So definitely master your character, master the skills, and then feel free to ask questions. That's something that I think people always worry about, thinking that like, I don't know the system well enough to ask. It's like, always ask.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, the first time I ever played, one of the other players was always like, I don't know what I can do. And we're like, just say what you want to do. Have fun with it, you know? And then meanwhile, there was me who was like, I have a jar of honey. I'm going to jump onto the giant's face and bash glass and honey all over his face to try and blind him. And the DM's like, okay, you know, and I could just see them like being like, I don't want it to make it so like you can just always say you're going for the eyes, but let's try to make this fun. It makes the DM think on their feet. Alex, what do you think about this topic?
It's and you guys, I think you guys kind of touched on it earlier. Is someone that can you can sit next to a new player and help that new player enjoy the game, help that new player be better and bring them into it. You know, you need and a lot of times, you know, that person ends up playing the bard or a paladin that's the high charisma character that the party can lean on. You know, because you know, not everyone's up for that kind of stuff, right? My brother plays D&D. He loves D&D, but he has trouble talking like that. And so the person you can put next to him to help bring him into it, the person that you can lean on as a DM to help push story along as well. Because that's the problem. That's people always think like, oh, your DM, your story. No, it's our story. We're working together on it. And so a skilled player can help push the story. And I love, one of my players, he's great at this. He has changed my game so much from what I intended them to be, because he pushes the story and he pushes me to think on my feet. That was new. I wasn't expecting that, but in a good way. It was welcomed, and he pushed you as much as you pushed him. So
My group, I'm lucky. I have a group that I've been playing with for 8 years. So every single one of us have been playing for quite a long time before that 8 years. And so we have gelled pretty well. So we kind of work well together. And I guess the things that I look for, and people have already talked about a lot of this. So I'm just going to go through the stuff that I kind of think fulfills that, and then focus on the one thing that sort of stands out for me in terms of being an experienced player. Knowing the rules and system mastery is definitely part of it. But social etiquette is like, there's the social etiquette to playing Dungeons and Dragons, which actually is a skill you have to learn. We would hope that people learn these things, but they don't always. Respecting the group is like a huge factor for me, and well-rounded. I like it when players can deal with the character interaction between themselves and the NPCs, and they can deal with mechanical, crunchy stuff as well, that it all sort of comes together. So well-rounded is nice. I like the idea that, I feel like they've got skill when they understand where the dungeon master's coming from. And I feel that was often a difficult task to achieve unless you've done it. And so all the people in my group, we are all dungeon masters. We just take turns. We just rotate round. It's not my turn right now, somebody else. Their approach is to help the dungeon master, but not just the dungeon master, but everybody else who's a player at the table. So there's a very sort of, let's assist each other. It's very much like a team approach to the whole process. And so for me, I feel like a skilled player is actually also a dungeon master. They do both. Advanced tactics is certainly an aspect to that. But when I say advanced tactics, I think maybe people get sort of a little bit lost. I'm going to say just problem solving. The ability to just look at a situation, and Daniel was talking about this, and to be able to come up with a solution for solving a problem. Because Dungeons and Dragons, I think ultimately has always been about solving problems. Not necessarily taking the sword or casting a spell and shoving it in the monster's gut and then tearing them to pieces and then inspecting their pockets or their gut for gold. So there's different ways of dealing with it, right? One of the things I did, and you mentioned soap, Jordan, I did a whole lot of videos on how to use various pieces of adventuring gear. The 10-foot pole,
I've watched
soap. Now, yeah, I know you have. And when you mentioned that, I knew where you were going with that. And I did that quite deliberately because I think a lot of that information had kind of got lost somehow. If you'd played the game in the past, you kind of knew a lot of this. But also, too, because we were all so isolated back then, some people knew some stuff and some people knew other stuff. And so I actually had to get the community to pull it all together to make those videos. Because alone, on my own, I didn't have all the answers. I didn't have all of the different ways that people had done it. And there were a lot of different things. Some of them are jest. But it's surprising the sorts of information and the way that you can utilize your environment. And I really like that. I like the idea that we aren't, when we play Dungeons and Dragons, and when a player plays Dungeons and Dragons, that they're not confined to the character sheet or the mechanics of the game or rolling a dice, and that they're really focusing on, I'm here, given the information that I've got, what can I do with the stuff that I've got around me or in my pack is certainly an aspect, but what is also around me. I think that's really important in terms of expressing a skilled player.
Yeah, if I can relate it back to improv again, one of my favorite improv principles is look outward, which said in another way is make your partner look good. So to me, a skilled player makes the DM look good, makes other players look good, and makes the game mechanics seem super fun to explore. Also, they really know all the group's dietary restrictions, so they can bring good snacks. That's also important. Thanks everyone for listening, and I really hope that we all work on becoming more skilled players, which means better friends. And we'll see you in the next video.